Welcome to Training Insights, episode 11. Hi, and welcome to Training Insights, brought to you by Training Magazine. Go to trainingmag.com. My name is Kevin McGowan, and I'll be your host. And today we're doing something of a Kevin show, and an Ottawa show, actually. As you might know, I'm based in Ottawa, Canada, and my guest today is another Kevin. His name's Kevin Judge, and he's also based here in Ottawa, Ontario. He is a consultant. He's been a boss. He's worked in a lot of different industries. He has written a new book that's coming out this year. It's called How to Fix a Bad Boss. And I mean, it's always easy to complain around the water cooler about your manager or your director or whoever, but how do you actually go about making that relationship better, and how do you actually make that person maybe that much better at their job if they need the help? So Kevin has really some great insights on this, so I'm not going to give it all away now. Let's turn it over to Mr. Kevin Judge.
Kevin Judge, welcome to Training Insights.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
It's the Kevin show today, which is pretty cool. You're my first guest with the same name as mine, so it's awesome.
Wow, that's great. Such a great first name. So.
It is. It's one of my favorites. Look, you're based in Ottawa. You're a consultant. You're an author. You're kind of a jack of many, if not all, trades. But you've got a new book coming out called How to Fix the Bad Boss, coming out by the end of 2017. I want to start off asking you, why were you inspired to write this book?
Yeah, it's a great question, because to tell the truth, I never actually pictured myself as an author.
No.
And I ended up going to a workshop that was talking about using a book as a marketing tool, and it got me thinking about what sort of book could I write that could help people. And I've worked for corporations for 21 different years, and in those 21 years I had 27 bosses.
Wow.
And now I've got to tell you, Kevin, it was them. It wasn't me. I'm not the one that made everybody change bosses on me. But I went through the high tech sector and financial services and a couple of different organizations. I didn't move around a lot, but just through restructuring and that, I ended up with a lot of new bosses, and I had to start over so many times. So there's a challenge with that. But the great thing is, with those 27 bosses, I found I had some really fantastic bosses. They were awesome, and that's a really great thing. And I had a whole bunch of what I'll call as adequate bosses. And reflecting back now, an adequate boss, if you've got one, that's actually a great thing as well. Because the worst possible thing is I had a few bosses that were just horrible, life-changing horrible. And so I've seen the damage personally in terms of with the impact that a bad boss can have, plus how it impacts the organization and all of the other people that report into that boss. And so I wanted to be able to help those people that are suffering with a bad boss situation, but also to help the bad boss, because I'm a big believer that everybody has the ability to be successful, including bad bosses, because most of the time they're actually great people. They just, well, pardon the term, but they suck at being bosses.
Fair enough, yeah.
Right? And it's not always, it's like they don't wake up in the morning and get out of bed and say, I'm going to make life miserable for my employees today. They're actually trying to do something right. It's just the way they're going about it that's not working. So I help the organization as well to figure out how do we solve this without having to fire that bad boss.
Right. So there's a lot there that I want to follow up on. Because you talked about kind of the spectrum from good to okay to bad. Why? Let me ask this a different way. How does a bad boss get into that role in the first place, do you think?
Well, that's
from your experience.
Yeah. Well, it's somewhat of a norm. Like if we think about everybody that's promoted into a management and leadership role, typically what happens in an organization is they take an individual contributor who's performing well. They're really technical. They're really good at getting projects done or selling or something like that. So they take somebody with that technical expertise and they say, fantastic, we don't know how to reward you anymore. We're going to promote you to be a manager of people. And so you take a technical person and throw in the whole interpersonal side of things. Yeah. And where the problem falls is when they don't get the development and the mentoring and the support to figure out how do you do that. That's like throwing a kid that doesn't know how to swim into the deep end of a pool and saying, good luck.
Yeah. Right? Having been in that position, Kevin, I totally relate. That happened to me. I was an individual contributor, and I was promoted to a management role. And looking back now, many years later, I wasn't ready, and I didn't have the training. I didn't have that, so I totally kind of see what you're talking about.
Yeah. And it's not like that person that's been thrown into the deep end is going to complain too hard to say, hey, I can't do this, because they want the promotion, they want the recognition, and they want to do well, so they try their best.
Yeah. Now, where does the tipping point happen? Like, what is the split between, like, you know, a really good boss and a really bad boss? Like, I know what an okay boss is. Like, that's great to have, like you say. You know, they're supportive. They kind of, you know, deal with the high end stuff from, you know, senior management or whatever to kind of get you through all that. But what does a bad boss do to harm the organization?
Yeah, so there's a number of different behaviors, and I want to preface this by saying, you know, if somebody has a boss that does one of these behaviors, it doesn't mean that they're a bad boss. It just means that they've got something that's not quite right. But when you combine them all and it becomes a regular occurrence, then you've got a real big problem. So things like they don't walk the talk. So they expect you as an employee to behave one way and toe the line for the organization, but they're not doing the same thing, or they are constantly taking credit for all of the work that you and your team does and not giving any sort of recognition. It can get down to active sabotage of where they will do things to actually hinder or hurt your career for no apparent reason. There's lots of cliche terms here, like throwing you under the bus. So something goes wrong. Mistakes happen in organizations. So I can give you an example. There was a situation where there was a leader who was so petrified of being looked at as incompetent and failing that anytime their senior leader or senior leader clients would find any sort of mistake or question something about the analysis that her team had done, she would throw the team under the bus and then go back and yell at the team, threaten firing if they made a mistake like that after that sort of thing. So that's going to the extreme level, and not a very healthy relationship whatsoever.
Well, no, you can see how that would filter through that individual team, but I mean, it comes like a cancer in the organization, right? It just makes things unhealthy and kind of toxic.
Absolutely. So the employees, they end up becoming fearful of that boss, fearful of their job, of losing their job. They disengage. They a lot of the time can actually start developing health issues because of the increased stress, then the mental health as well. And the problem for the organization, and this is where a lot of organizations fail to see it, is even if you don't care about the employee and how the employee is feeling, which you should do, you should care about them. But even if you don't care about them, there's a financial impact on the organization, because as soon as people start becoming disengaged and cynical, they spend the majority of their time complaining about the boss, talking about meetings after meetings, potentially even sabotaging work to retaliate against the boss, or they leave. And I've seen them leave in large numbers because of a boss situation. So the impact, it's actually costing organizations hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they don't know it, and they're not doing anything about it.
So that's a perfect segue. What do you do? I mean, I don't want to give away your whole book, obviously, but what's like tell me everything. What's the first thing? I mean, beyond recognizing that you've got a problem, how do you step in as an employee, or even as the manager of the manager? Either way, how do you engage with this person and say, look, things aren't going well?
Yeah. So there's two sides to it. So there's the employee and the employer. So if we look at the employee, there's a few tactics that they can do, and I'm going to be putting a section in my book called The Employee Survival Guide to a Bad Boss. But I'll give you one key piece, and that's the first decision an employee needs to make, and that's, do I want to stay or do I want to go? And if you want to stay, well, how can you work through the situation and look at it differently? And are there things that you can do to help make the problem a little bit better? If you want to go, then that's a completely different set of actions that you would take.
Right.
So, but for the employer, recognizing, yes, we have a problem is so critical. But two, as well, being able to step up and say, we're going to take action, and there's going to be consequences if this leader doesn't make a change in their behavior.
Right.
Now, without that consequence, it has to be a meaningful consequence, and it doesn't have to be firing, although that's a really good one. If you don't change your behavior within a certain time frame, and we're going to help you get there, then we're going to have to look at other options. So it could be demotion, it could be no bonus, it could be firing, whatever it is. But have to have that meaningful consequence, and then have that feedback to the individual. Mm-hmm. And people are not very good at giving feedback. They make it. They don't give it as bluntly as they really should sometimes, especially when you're dealing with a bad boss situation. So it could sound something as simple as, here's the perception of your leadership style. Here's the impact that we see it having. It's not an acceptable behavior for this role. Mm-hmm. It must change, and if it doesn't, here's the consequences. We want to help you succeed, and here's what we're going to do to help you be successful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's the whole performance management plan, I guess, or a performance improvement plan kind of system where you can identify it and work towards success. Are there, and I'm assuming that most people, like you say, most people are doing their best and they're going to be reasonable and hopefully maybe not happy about the feedback, but at least receptive once the shock has worn off. Are there, in your experience even, are there people who just wouldn't accept that they're not doing well, and what do you do in that kind of situation?
Yeah, so you're right. There's those two groups of people, and thankfully the majority of them actually fall under the, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was having that impact.
Yeah.
And yes, I'd love to have some help. But it doesn't come across that nicely at first because they're shocked and they retaliate.
It's embarrassing and it's upsetting and it's all the rest, right? Like you don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. For those people that are saying, hey, you know what, I'm not a problem and it's everybody else, etc. That's where the rubber has to hit the road, right? That's where the corporation needs to say, well, you have two choices. You can improve, or the consequence takes effect.
Yeah.
Right? And unfortunately, in some cases, not many, but in some cases, the right decision for that bad boss might actually be, you know what, I'm done here. I'm just going to go work for another company.
Yeah.
Because they can have a bad boss themselves, right?
Well, that's true. It's often not just one, right? It can be kind of an organizational culture really good.
Yeah.
Of bad boss-ship, for lack of a better term.
Yeah,
you can use that in the book if you want.
Yeah, okay, I will. I'll quote you. So, but organizational culture certainly fits. So there's a number of key things that I look at with people. It's not only the behaviors of the boss, but how are you as an organization doing your hiring and decision making on putting people into a management role? What are you doing to support them, to help them grow? How are you doing your succession planning and talent review process to make sure that you actually can identify what is a good boss and how are we measuring people against it?
Yeah. Okay. Well, Kevin, I know we could probably talk all day, and I just would love to sit and have a beer and swap stories. Maybe that'd be fun, actually.
that would be great. I'd love to.
Off the record, I guess. But I want to say thanks. The book is called "How to Fix a Bad Boss" by Kevin Judge. It's coming out this year, and stay tuned. We'll publicize it when it actually hits the shelves. But how can people buy it when it does come out?
People can go to howtofixabadboss.com.
Okay.
And so it's howtofixabadboss.com. And there's actually, it exists there today. You can pre-order now, or you can, when it is out and ready, there's the ability to get it there.
Perfect. Well, Kevin Judge, thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Kevin. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
And that was Kevin Judge, based here in my town, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to know more about Kevin or about how to fix a bad boss, about his book, or maybe you're interested in some consulting work, who knows, you can go to fixabadboss.com. All sorts of info about the book, and you can track when it's actually coming available. It should be out by the end of the year. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, the other Kevin involved in today's show, you can go to kevinmcgowan.ca and you can send me an email, drop me a line, and if you have any suggestions, or maybe if you'd like to be featured on the Training Insights podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks to Kevin Judge, and thanks to everyone at Training Magazine. We'll see you next time.